After the return of the Jews to the Holy Land, following the conquest of Babylon by King Cyrus in 538, there had to be not only restoration on the physical level, a lot of building, but also on the moral level. And hence the reading of the law was an important event. An explanation would accompany the reading. It would seem that also the sacred language of Hebrew was not entirely preserved in the long period of exile, and therefore a certain translation had to take place as well. We noticed that some kind of podium or pulpit had been prepared, made of wood, and all the people could see. It is important that all see and hear and understand. We are told explicitly that it was from the age of understanding upwards that people were there to hear, and they had to understand, and so every word was explained. It was a whole day, a long session therefore. People now are less able to listen attentively because there are too many words contaminating and cluttering their inner system. People are more fidgety. They need more excitement than before. With regard to the importance of this reading and explanation, it does apply to us. Some years ago, there was a synod in Rome, a gathering of bishops to discuss the Word. And one of the things that came through was that there was a consensus that the quality of reading, of readership, of proclamation was inferior in many parts of the Church to what is required regarding the dignity of the word proclaimed. And one does see a situation, alas, fairly widespread, where incompetence leads to a diminishing of the power of the word, and therefore a certain deflecting, filtering of the potential graces in the air. Fewer graces will be perceived if fewer messages are heard profoundly. To hear a message profoundly, one needs to know how to handle the word. The echo of the word is what gives its strength to the lingering sound. If that echo is not heard, if it is drowned in just too many words coming too quickly, one after the other, then people, bit by bit, cannot cope and do not even try to cope. They just hope that it will finish as soon as possible. There needs to be professional training. In the early church, people were ordained for these roles, and it was something so sacred that they could be actually accomplishing those roles forever without going to a higher one, in inverted commas. Any Tom, Dick and Harry might be approached quite often nowadays a few minutes before the celebration itself and say, "Will you read the second reading?" And we know the consequences. With regard to the interpreting, that too matters. The word has to be opened and points have to be drawn out of it. For that to happen effectively, the art of preaching must be studied and practiced. It is partly due to its successful delivery that it has its effect, but only partly. The word itself has to be God's word, and received first of all from God in prayer. People sense the difference. And it is not sufficient to read. There is a difference between a reading and a sermon. A sermon that is in the tradition of the highest Catholic preaching of the centuries. Great preachers were vibrant and gave their whole being to the proclamation in the pulpit. Other things do help. Acoustics matter, and knowing how to handle them. Even the visibility does matter. In exorcism it has come out that it was a great victory for the demon to get rid of the pulpit, because the physical proclamation on high gave authority. It emphasized the dignity of the word and role of the sacred preacher, and he was more inclined to have an effect when he was with authority proclaiming in that mode. Having said that, it is an advantage to have a microphone, because they had to be trained in days of old to use the voice as the natural microphone. The ancient structure of having an abat-voix, a voice breaker on top of the pulpit, can still be seen in the continental ones, the old churches. It was a means of getting the voice to go out, not go up. But the microphone does have the advantage of allowing us to proclaim very audibly each word and be heard throughout the church without any blind corners. And that does also give the possibility of varying the voice. And it is important to know how to use the voice. It draws attention to certain points, and people are not allowed to go to sleep. And watching them all the time that one is preaching makes it possible to see when they are giving that indirect feedback to the preacher. He needs to pick up their body language and to see when they're listening or not, and to ask himself why at this point are they not listening, and to make sure they start listening from the next sentence on. There are ways and means of not letting them doze off. And to have its effect, it must be in some way visual. We need the audio-visual, stories, gestures, and things that are rememberable. And on it we attach a message, which embedded in the memory cells will come out years later and have a sudden effect from the distant past.